Dr. Pranavan Yoganathan, don't rush protein into the colon, and colonic polyps caused by hyperinsulinemia.
There's a lot of misconceptions out there about, our gut can only handle a certain amount of protein load and so forth. I think if it's a processed protein, yes, because it just rushes through this rapid transit into the colon. Once it's in the colon, there's no point. You've got no ability to absorb that protein. It's all up to the bacteria now. And they essentially strip that fuel for themselves. They give you very little in terms of that bargain, as we've discussed earlier. But we've got this reservoir, we've got this capacity to contain things like meat within our stomach and slowly release it into the small bowel. The body regulates that so well and so efficiently. And I think we failed to take that into consideration, that this system, this digestive tract that we've evolved from a fruit-eating ancestor 4 million years ago to where we are now, is finely tuned for animal-sourced foods. It really is. And this is the problem. Evolutionary biology is not something that's taught in med school, is it? It's not a big part of our curriculum. It makes zero part of our curriculum. So we fail to understand these nuances as doctors, and hence we can't really hand out that knowledge to our patients. But the way I try and teach my patients is that we are very, very finely tuned for it. It's just the modern environment, the modern method of eating is just completely out of keeping with evolution, and we have evolutionary mismatch. So in terms to go back to your question about meat, I think we've got great capacity to absorb it. We've just got to eat to satiety. You can almost pick the individuals that will have colonic polyps. They're overweight generally, diabetic. Caucasian, being Caucasian is also a risk factor, and being above the age of 50. These are all risk factors for colonic polyps. I think it's been linked to red meat before, but the randomized control trials like the polyp study and the Women's Health Initiative, which is a high quality study, really didn't show that a high fiber diet or a vegetable plant-based diet helped in terms of polyp development. There really wasn't. So it all goes back to hyperinsulinemia, which is of course linked with diabetes and obesity. I think that is the biggest risk factor. Insulin at its core is a growth factor. You could use it to grow your adipocytes, or you could grow your muscles. I mean, bodybuilders utilize their own endogenous insulin to grow. It's just they've got to eat in a way to stimulate that. We've got to remember that it is a growth factor, and I think you've answered the question there, Shawn. It is hyperinsulinemia that's the issue at its core. That's a risk factor for these colonic polyps, and we're seeing more and more of these now. Vast majority of illness that we see is just this terrible food environment in which we live, with extremely sedentary lifestyles, right? So I have not seen an issue that a good diet and a little bit of resistance training can't correct. So we can become very one-eyed in this space because you think diet fixes everything, but largely speaking, it really doesn't it? With chronic illness, 99% of it will resolve with the right approach.
There are a lot of misconceptions about our gut's ability to handle a high load of protein. That is only processed protein, because processed protein rushes through to the colon. Once it is in the colon, you have no ability to absorb it. In the colon, the bacteria strip it for their own fuel. We have this capacity to contain meat in our stomach and slowly release it into the small bowel. The body regulates this so well and efficiently. Our digestive tract is finely tuned for animal-sourced foods. This is not taught in our medical schools and is not passed on to our patients. I try to teach my patients we are finely tuned for eating animal-sourced foods, but modern eating is out of sync with this. We have a great capacity to absorb meat. We just need to eat to satiety. Colonic polyps. Individuals who will have this are generally overweight and generally diabetic. And other risk factors include being Caucasian, above 50 years in age. Colonic polyps are traditionally linked to red meat, but randomized controlled trials like the Women's Health Initiative, a high-quality study, have found no link. They found that high-fiber, plant-based diets did not help. It goes back to hyperinsulinemia, which is also linked to obesity and diabetes. This is the biggest risk factor. Insulin at its core is a growth factor. It can be used to grow adipocytes, or fat, and muscle. For colonic polyps, hyperinsulinemia, the growth factor, is at its core. The vast majority of illness we see is just this: terrible food environment, extremely sedentary lifestyles. Dr. Yoganathan says, I haven't seen an issue that a good diet and a little resistance training can't correct. And that is 99% of chronic illnesses. Annotated, summarized. Please share with a loved one.